Welcome to Elysium, my friends. It's a pleasure to have you here. How's everybody doing this evening? I understand for our kind viewers that this evening is a night of rejoice and celebration, a night favoring the wine and vino, a tradition going back hundreds of generations to a time when we gathered grapes in ceramic pots and allowed them to ferment for longer than might otherwise have been suggested. This evening I myself enjoyed a bottle of Vino Rosa from the old country. How have you celebrated this lovely evening? We're happy to have you here celebrating it with us now tonight. Gallant, welcome to the stream. It's truly a pleasure to have you here. I'd like to take a moment to appreciate Gallant Geek's stream. He often explores some of the other harsh realities of our masquerade-laden world. Though there have been nights that his explorations have taken a more humorous tone. Truly a lovely gentleman and one you'll quite enjoy watching. Who else do we have joining us this evening? Absolutely. Nothing I would say if it weren't true, my friend. There's a reason I stop by your area of the internet when I'm finished with my own. I'm going to give everybody a few minutes to settle in here before we start with the evening. And we'll start tonight with a reading of the stories so far, a synopsis of where our journey and the branching paths of our decisions have taken us. It has been quite the journey so far. Our service to Prince Leto has led us down a rather interesting path, and we find ourselves at the crossroads of choices that will continue to shape our journey down the night road. So please, make yourself comfortable. Grab something beautiful to drink, perhaps a glass of wine in the celebration of National Wine Day, and know that in about 5 minutes, we'll begin with this synopsis and then continue with the decisions that shape no one's path. As seems to be the case of late, I have run into my own set of technical difficulties this evening already. While I'm normally quite able to get my mouse and all the little pieces of this stream working, this evening, technology has thwarted this old kindred once again, and I am forced to use the sliding touchpad of my laptop to organize all the little pieces of our narrative as they stand. Quite troublesome. Truly an instrument of torture, designed to bring rage and frenzy into the minds of those of us too technologically challenged to get them to work. It may well be the work of the Second Inquisition, Gallant. I hadn't considered the ramifications of their purposeful destruction of our instrumentation this evening. Nevertheless, we shall continue and we shall persevere. The path we tread is not one easily trodden, but it is one that is necessary, nevertheless. see here. There are about 3 minutes yet until we properly begin the evening, so if you've something you feel you must do before we settle in for the story, I highly recommend performing those actions now. As I've said before, we will begin with a synopsis of the story so far, and then we have yet a couple of decisions to make before we can begin the next chapter of Night Road. Now, for those of you just joining us this evening, this is an interactive fiction based on Vampire the Masquerade, written by Choice of Games LLC and Kyle Marquis. At each decision we're faced with, much like a choose-your-own-adventure novel, I'll present a certain amount of time to the audience. In that time, please feel free to discuss amongst yourselves the options available to you. Outwit, cajole, and demand the obsequience of your fellow kindred as we progress no one's story. When we've reached a plurality of votes and the time has expired, we will move forward with the decisions that have been reached, whether they be good or bad. This is a mature story, so I recommend, if you have bypassed the protections on this internet medium to prevent the young ones from hearing anything they might otherwise be harmed by, turn back now. There are warnings of blood, gore, likely some mild sexual content, and of course everything that makes we kindred into the vampires that we are. There's a reason they speak of the beast within our blood. But that's something we'll get more into as we get further along. We've about 1 minute left before we begin the synopsis. Please, grab yourself a drink, make yourself comfortable, and prepare to discuss the story of the gangrel which we control together. I'm glad you approve, Keeper of our Elysium. There are about 15 seconds left until we begin this evening. Welcome, Nashan, an astrophysicist. It's a pleasure to have you both here. I believe we may also be joined by mine own sire, Cryptonomic. It's also a pleasure to have you here this evening. I trust you've all made yourselves quite comfortable. That we sit in anticipation of a story which has been unfolding now for a little less than a month. And quite a story it's been. As I've said already, we start with a synopsis. And for those of you who have been with us thus far, this synopsis might sound somewhat familiar. However, I think it's important to maintain the integrity of our story, that the synopsis continue to be presented at the beginning of each week of decision-making we embark upon. So without further ado, we move forward. We are no one, a non-binary 11th generation gangrel, sired by Lampago, who's gone missing. After the departure of our sire, who kept a dungeon of whelps upon whom to feed and be served, we were proffered a mentor by the Camarilla, within whose masquerade we thrived. Julian Sim, a young Banu Him assassin, became our mentor, and we learned much, both good and evil, from the belying youth of our new vampire comrade. It was in those early nights, under the desert moon, that we diablerized Isla, an older vampire, and drank deep of the vitae coursing through Julian Sim's sire's veins. A deadly sin in the eyes of the Camarilla, but one that we nevertheless found ourselves drawn easily into, and enjoyed. We left Julian just as easily, disapproving of the Camarilla methods of blood extraction pits on migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. We stole his lime green geo-tracker and absconded with $300 of his money as absolutely soon as we were able to. He found us after only a year, sunken, sallow, and nearly bloodless. He tossed us more coinage and a stack of USBs, demanding that we repay our crimes against him by interring ourselves into his service. How could we refuse? In the course of this service, we stumbled upon a convenience store within which we made our shelter, hiding from the blazing heat of the American Southwest. The next night, as we woke, we smelled fresh blood, and knew immediately there were fresh mortals nearby. Finally, we could feed. This squad of mortals was seeking their own sustenance and shelter, and before we could grab one of them upon which to feast, something else startled them. An old Nosferatu, a sewer rat, with all the markings of death in their undeath, destroyed one of the living creatures with little more than a swipe of their fist. Even in unlife there is monstrosity, and the mindless white former Nosferatu intended to destroy everything in its path. It was only able to kill one of the mortal creatures before we drove it off with the assistance of one other mortal and our loyal Lobo, the wolf Magda. We curtailed any possible masquerade breach of the Nosferatu sighting, as well as our own horrific visage, by murdering the three creatures, feasting on this mortal's blood and filling our veins with the sating blood of the mortal coil. When we'd drunk our fill, glutting ourselves on the new vitae coursing now through our veins, we hacked up their bodies so it would appear an act of senseless violence, all too common in the Arizona deserts. Magda quite enjoyed the bones we tossed her as well. Anything to keep the authorities off our trails. Shortly thereafter, we found ourselves in Tucson and quickly made our way to the known Elysium at the Viper, a prominent club downtown. We knew we couldn't meet the prince of this city the way it stood, covered in blood and gore and miasma of nights spent sheltering in a convenience store in the baking heat of a semi-trailer. So we approached one of his many servants, obvious to us from our years spent studying the human enigma, and requested a shower, as well as a fresh change of clothing. We were certain to keep our courier package close at hand, as we showered and dressed ourselves in the fresh coveralls given to us. After all, nothing can be trusted. We must show vigilance in our path. And then we approached the prince. Prince Leto knew us before we even arrived, and his own pet sewer rat, another Nosferatu, viewed us with as much disdain as Leto's eagle, whom we'd chased off just the night prior outside the convenience store in which we found shelter. The prince was open, more open than most, and cute. and immediately offered to share the details of the USBs we had delivered him. What game was he playing? We were met then with a series of images of an unknown Tremere warlock and an all-too-familiar Nosferatu, the White, whom we had just driven off the night prior. Lato's Nosferatu servant, Dove, well, you might say her perturbance was palpable, though cut short, and we found ourselves destined to be truthful with the prince, both about our lack of information concerning the Tremere's whereabouts or history, as well as our encounter and subsequent escape of the White, who we then learned to be Dove's former sire. The prince left the White's future to this Nosferatu, Dove. She must have been anything but pleased. We were introduced to various members of the prince's court, including those from whom we could acquire weapons, clothing, shelter, and perhaps most importantly, blood. We spent some time schmoozing, lying, and ingratiating ourselves to the prince's court before setting off in search of our life's work at the Red Rock, a nearby club where we'd been given permission to feed. You see, it would have been foolish of us to feed at the Viper, drawing attention from hunters, from the Second Inquisition, from police not on the prince's payroll, is simply unwise when we are trying to maintain the veil of realities that is the Masquerade. And thus, in order to maintain this simple falsehood, this cover over our immediately menacing actions, we must feed elsewhere, lest the rain of fire be brought down upon our heads. At the Red Rock, we found a young woman there, trying entirely too hard to exhibit a persona of crazy mess. We let her talk her way into our pants, and spent a portion of the evening providing her with la patinoire of our feeding, sealing the wound with a swipe of our tongue lest she spread the tale of her intercourse with a vampire. We made our way from there back into the cool desert air. A car then approached us, tossing from within its confines information of a nearby pawn shop where we could acquire a car, and then sped off into the night. At the pawn shop, we met Elena, a pretty, tattooed woman with whom we made quick rapport. Her H.R. Geiger tattoos were as intriguing as her face, and we flirted our way into an exchange of discounts for future financial work in her shop. After much perusal, we purchased there a Honda S2000, a quick convertible that lacked reliability or durability. It would get us to where we're going, but certainly not much further. We made our way then to a sanctuary provided us by the gangrel prince of the city, an office in a parking garage, within which we might find rest, if only for a night. That's when Julian returned. Again. He informed us that we were being watched, and maybe the politics in this city weren't nearly what they seemed. He told us, then showed us, of the webcam buried in our ceiling, and gave it to us upon which to do research while he sought out any other bugs that might be buried in our walls, watching, listening like so many creatures of the night do. We discovered that some of the supplies for this webcam were tied to the Second Inquisition, an ancient enemy of Cainites. reborn in the fires of our path. Of course, we know we can't trust Julian even as far as we could throw him, and we certainly can't throw him far. We ended the evening by sending Julian on his way, bedding down in our sanctuary with more on our minds and our plates than has been there any time in recent memory. The next night, we must needs to return to the prince for details on our new job, and with more decisions yet left to make. The night prior, or the next night, depending on how you look on it, time does become subjective to the kindred who live hundreds, if not thousands of years, generations of cattle and prey passing beneath our watchful eye as we progress our own politicking to increase our power. We set out on the first of Prince Leteau's 3 courier jobs to see Patamuster, a Bruja, at St. Basil's Hospital in Phoenix. We were given both a key card and a name tag, as well as a USB to deliver. Pertinent information, to be sure. When we arrived at the hospital, if you could call this miasmic dungeon of a building that, it was immediately apparent that this was anything but a place of healing. We made our way to the first service door we could find and swiped our keycard just beyond the reception desk. To both our chagrin and dismay, the entry light ran red as the old vitae coursing through our sluggish veins. With a soft glance around, to find the guard candy-crushing aimlessly on his mobile phone, we swipe it a second time. Red. Again. Now, at this point, a receptionist has her stink eye upon us, and we knew our janitorial disguise was unlikely to get us far in the face of this rabid Karen. However, Magda was waiting just outside the hospital, and our lovely Lobo was eager to showcase her nimble nose. Utilizing our bond of animalism with the famulus, we searched the exterior of the hospital for an alternative entrance. The door we discovered seemed open, but had above it an old CCTV camera that would surely record our entry. Driscoll, thank you. Thank you both for joining us and your lovely compliment. It's a pleasure to have you here this evening, and we hope for many evenings to come. Now, this CCTV camera might have recorded our entrance, had it been anything but a decoy cam with a false wire, which allowed us to waltz right in, and the minimalist security present made it clear they didn't have much communication with hospital administration. A small break, at last, and at the very least. Our main concern here was business. After all, we were hired to bring a job to this place, first and foremost. We immediately took in our surroundings, looking for anything that might alarm the prince as a breach of the Masquerade. It didn't take long. This den of iniquity drew our ire when we found a freshly drained corpse littering a gurney in the hallway, bite marks about its neck and wrists. These Cainites were either so stupidly brazen as to neglect sealing the wound, or, perhaps worse, too thin-blooded to have acquired that particular power. Either way, we doubted that Prince Leteau would have approved. That's when we heard the voice. Oh my God, his neck! There's so much blood! We wandered into the nearby room to find a young-looking woman sitting down and an older man who looked to have more than 1 foot in death's door already. Aged before his time. This was the Bruja Patamuster, We recognized him from Leteau's photos. Unable to convince the squeamish Rita May to assist with this body in the room, Paternoster encouraged us to hold him down, which we obliged, pushing down our own hunger and gripping the still living but on the edge of death corpse by the shoulders. It became readily apparent that the man wasn't going to make it. Paternoster and his sycophant, Rita May, refusing to let a fresh meal go to waste, immediately set upon the freshly deceased, devouring and draining it before the Bruja turned his full attention to us, dismissing his minion in favor of the message we brought from Prince Leteau. This one seemed to know us already as well. How quickly news travels in the underworld of the Arizona deserts. We were quickly escorted to his office, and the aged rebel displayed a supernatural ability to summon and dismiss two edgy katanas from seemingly nowhere. Duncan and Connor, as the Highlander fan called them, are part judge, jury, and executioner here at St. Basil's. But there are bigger fish to fry, and larger things to stake. Paternoster quickly explained the new director's plans, as well as the threat those plans posed to Prince Leteau, the Camarilla, and the kindred, if you can call them that, of St. Basil's. A proposal has been put before the Phoenix City Council, both to renovate and modernize the dismal hospital. Records, windows, staff, windows, everything the kindred here cannot afford to experience. We could have gone home. Our job here was finished after all, but in this moment we saw opportunity, as any ambitious kindred would. After thoroughly admonishing the Bruja for his failures, he gave us the lowdown. The director's office is guarded, though not well enough, and the two of us hatched a plot together to break in and plant incriminating evidence on her computer from which she would never recover. Paternoster was to disable the guard's monitoring station, and we decided on cosplaying a medical physician to break in under the guise of record-seeking within the 5-minute window he provided. Now, at this point, we've spent the last couple of nights in between our conversations with Paternoster sleeping in the morgue of the hospital, a special box just for us. We watched the guards' habits, learned their schedules, and acquainted ourselves with their weaknesses while we met Paternoster's would-be coterie. Malkavians, rat-infested Nosferatu, thin-bloods, negative, and a ghostly woman we could make neither heads nor tails of. Before we've even formulated our plan to ruin the director, one of Paternoster's coterie is found in the hospital dead, headless. We offered to perform an autopsy, utilizing our skills from the field of battle in our formal naval career, and discovered that she was indeed definitively beheaded. Thank you for that, Gallant. I truly appreciate your desire to further our goals of communication with the mortal world and kindred alike. It's important that we spread our stories far and wide, for now has come the time that the masquerade itself must be lifted. This veil between our realities shifted to allow the kind who look in upon us with questioning eyes to know the extent of what it is that we do and what we desire upon this plane. We have much work to do. For those of you who may just be joining us, I apologize in advance if there is any stuttering in the story itself as it stands. However, we're about a quarter through the synopsis of where we've come thus far on this night road, an interactive fiction provided us by Kyle Marquis and Choice of Games, perhaps wholly for their own reasons. I certainly have my own for presenting this story to you. When we've finished this synopsis, we'll move on with the next chapter in No One, the 11th generation gangrel's life, which we present to you now by way of the words we speak. Within our autopsy, not only did we discover that the member of Paternoster's coterie was definitively beheaded by something incredibly sharp, but after a more careful examination, we discovered as well a large indentation where she had been staked, as well as rat bites all along her torso. The Nosferatu. Paternoster joined us as we went to Sartorius's haven, Sartorius being the Nosferatu, beneath the morgue, but we were too late. He had departed and taken everything of value in that safe haven of his with him, leaving only an empty room when we finally arrived. Paternoster deemed he would deal with the Nosferatu on his own in due time. And we moved on towards our plan of dealing with the director. Thank you for that follow, Vecnakai. It is a pleasure to have you here in this Elysium tonight. I hope you're able to find this story enlightening in its own way, that it brings you to some understanding of what my kind has gone through in our constant hiding from mortal eyes, a kind of hiding we ought no longer pursue. Paternoster and I moved on towards our plan of dealing with the director. And so, this kindred dressed in our doctoral best and told the Bruja, Paternoster, to cut the monitoring station in 5 minutes' time. When he cut it, we approached the room, requesting access for records. Thank you as well, Thunder Mesos. I believe with your follow we have reached the established goal of 50 followers, and from here forward we will be able to bring a better understanding of the veil between realities to your kind. It is a pleasure to have the opportunity to bring this to your attention. We greatly appreciate you. Now, when the Bruja Paternoster cut the monitoring from the guard station, we approached the director's office, requesting that access for records. And while we had been seeking out previously the guard's information and schedules, thank you all, we realized that there did seem to be 2 different tiers of guards here at St. Basil's. The normal, don't-give-a-shit, run-of-the-mill type guards we're all used to seeing at hospital establishments across the country, and some far more militant guards who not only seemed more sure of themselves, but seemed to be keeping tabs on us and our whereabouts. We had to know more about them, and we set out to snag one of them while they were unsuspecting. With Magda's animalistic assistance, it was no problem, and we were able to keep her phone unlocked long enough to download the data on it before the phone promptly wiped itself. We trawled the data we downloaded from the phone, seeking information on whether these guards were in alignment with hunters, the Camarilla, the Sabbath, the Second Inquisition, or worse. Turns out, this was a group of opioid runners who'd been controlling the American Southwest's drug market for the past few years under various names. Now they worked from St. Basil's, and they were more than successful. The guard outside Director Corelli's office seemed alert when we arrived, and at our insistence to enter, told us we had but to wait for a moment while he got some confirmation. The lie detector determined that was a lie. The guard pulled his taser, and 2 more guards were quick to join him from around the corner. We bade Magda, our Lobo, to attack, but before we could accomplish much, one of the guards inexplicably pulled an alarm, and when that alarm was pulled, the hallways flooded with confused patients, who quickly turned into panicked patients when one of the guards fired into the ceiling without much regard for human life. Odd that, how we of the kindred must obey the laws of the Masquerade, uplifting and celebrating mortal life while mortal lives themselves wantonly rain violence down upon themselves. Strange. We made a dash for the exit, pulling humans in our way as the opioid runners fired into the crowd trying to stop us. We could hear the telltale sirens of police as we made our way out, and we were forced against a pillar inside of our car, the Honda S2000 we'd purchased from Elena, when a small firefight erupted between guards and police. A Wall Street massacre, nation, might just be in order. I hear they've been faced with their own troubles the past few weeks. Just tonight, one of their enemies spoke before a council of the mortal kind, bringing their attention to the inadequacies of the financial instrumentation upon which they rely. Now, this firefight between opioid runners and police was, of course, to our advantage, and we sent our trusty lupine Magda once more into the fray, bidding that she distract both guards and police long enough for us to jump into our now destroyed station wagon, which we drove, under fire, towards our own vehicle, the convertible. We were able to hop out of the station wagon and into our vehicle, while Magda joined us through the window before we sped away, driving as fast as we could towards Tucson. On the way back home, we heard a radio ad announcing the Phoenix City Council plans to renovate St. Basil's. And while we couldn't say we were happy with the outcome, we had avoided most of the backlash. For now. When we arrived back in Tucson, one of Leteau's servants paid us, and we slipped some of that money to another of his varied men, acquiring a blood doll for the night upon which to sate the beast quickly rising inside us. As the night wound down, we made a decision on which of Leteau's 3 jobs we would pursue next. Camp Scheffler. Continuing upon our journey of work for Prince Leteau gives us another job following our most esteemed mockery of the Camarige's desires for St. Basil's Psychiatric Hospital. While the prince wanted us to rein in the coterie running the shop and prevent the new director from sending what rats made their nest in the dismal hospice care from scurrying, we found ourselves pursuing other avenues, our own ambitions getting in the way of the Camarige's mission. Of course, we've all just heard how that went. Between Julian on one hand and Prince Leteau's lackeys on the other, we've had quite a bit of bullshit to put up with now, haven't we? The next evening, the prince made another request of us. This time, we're heading to Texas. But the prince has 2 deliveries for us rather than just the one. Oh well, 2 deliveries, 2 payments, eh? The prince, a man of both culture and business, knows this all too well. Naturally, there's a catch. Isn't there always? One of our deliveries is going to find us on the road, and we were told rather cavalierly to look for a red Toyota Corolla. Joy. So we set our GPS and began the long drive to Camp Scheffler, deep in the Yellow Rose state. The drive was long, but the pay was good, and how else would we be spending our evening otherwise? Along one deserted stretch of back roads, the Corolla found us. After we finally stopped, lit by the hefty halogen lights of their high beams, we discovered the nature of the second part of our job. At least, so we thought. The prince's servant, Carlos, able to procure us weapons and ammunition, a police officer by trade, was gasping for air in the driver's seat, bleeding out within his own vehicle, peppered with bullet wounds. Through blood-spattered coughs, Carlos told us not to worry about him, tossed us a USB and the location of our next job, an airstrip, private, several hours to the north of Camp Scheffler. Not far enough that we wouldn't be able to make it and the camp in the same night, but it would be close, and it didn't allow room for error. Too close for comfort, by our blood. We used our experience in tracking and reconnaissance, given to us by our time spent in the naval forces, to locate the abandoned airstrip on a map, and charted a backroads course that our Honda could handle with alacrity. The road was less bumpy than it might have been, and we arrived in good time. Too good. The road skittered beneath the Honda's tires when the surface changed before we saw it, and shortly after we arrived, our car was lit in spotlights. Too bright. This could only mean one of a few things. Feds, the Second Inquisition, or both. But around the time we saw the high-powered rifles held in suited hands aimed our way, we heard as well as felt the growling of the lupine figures stalking past our vehicle. Gangrel. Anarchs at best guess. We clutched the USB ever tighter in our hand, watching the plane above make its descent as carnage unfolded around us. The outcasts were attacking the agents, and gunshots rang out like bells. High-powered bells at that. Most of them seemed distracted, dealing with the wolves viciously grabbing their weapons in strong jaws and opening their throats with longer claws. All except for one. As we contemplated how best to cross the battlefield unscathed, one car gunned their engines, heading straight for us. With only moments to decide, we realized our best option would be to drive closer to the landing plane and lob the necessaries through the open door. Our aim be true. The car cut through the landscaping, cutting us off, but we were able to toss the information stick over and into the waiting hands of the shadowed figures silhouetted by the light inside. Now to escape. With the agents preoccupied and our erstwhile assailant finding bigger fish to fry, we slammed on the gas, racing to put the airport and its violence in our rear view. After all, it was only a couple of hours to Camp Scheffler. Only a few hours to sunrise. The ride there was uneventful, but we couldn't stop thinking about Leteau's servant and the way he healed those vicious wounds, crippling his body and racking his frame with the wet coughing that typically designates a death nearer than one might wish. Probably none of our business, but we filed the information away nevertheless, for future use. Our arrival at the migrant camp was met with a brusque figure we couldn't identify. The tall and gaunt Nile demanded we hand over the USB before we even entered the camp. Of course, we had in mind our marching orders from Leto. Give this to no one but Ellen Olivecrona. No one. Naturally, Nile had other plans. After a second, more threatening demand that we present the USB, we decided to utilize one of the oldest tricks in the book. Unfortunately, Nile did not fall for the old switcheroo and promptly led us, information well in hand, to Ellen's tent. Even a favored lackey must wait for master, and Nile was quite perturbed when Ellen would not see them immediately. So, we were provided quarters within which to rest until Olivecrona could see us. In the meantime, we checked out the local haunts. This place was a shit show, to put it politely. Another way to express this idea might be to say that if Leto had seen it, he'd have shit a brick. Probably literally. Camarija rubbed elbows veritably with anarchs in the local shark joint, a place by which to harbor blood dolls and feast upon the blood of kine, consensual or otherwise. It doesn't take much in a place like this to spark a feeding frenzy, and this place couldn't have been more than a hop, skip, and a jump away. A group of rusky bruja lingered about the joint, and I'd swear we saw one of them siphoning blood from a doll for their own greedy purposes. Greedy as well as nefarious. We spent a while looking around and may have done a bit of infiltration before the night was up, though we tripped some kind of alarm despite our careful manipulations. We escaped the close call undiscovered, and eventually bedded down for the day. We awoke to an insistent Nile pushing us to our meeting with Ellen. It went about as well as you'd expect. The Ventru played her reaction to news of an impending Second Inquisition raid cool, until Julian showed up. Again. He has a habit of showing up where he's not wanted. He told us, and the Ventru, in no uncertain terms what was about to happen, leaving Ellen to disappear with Nile in order to make preparations to move the migrant camp. Of course, she said this all fit her plan. I knew better. We knew better. So did Julian, who promptly tried to recruit us to flip on the Ventru and help him steal anything valuable we might. Oh, how the Banu Hakim ambition shows itself. When we refused, Julian fucked off to do his own thing, and we then went to make assistance to Ellen, where we found Nile and a gang of assembled rogues and ghouls all packing heat. Uh-oh. Thinking on, or off, our feet, we leapt towards a nearby ladder on a tent and made good our escape. That's about when we started to hear the drone of helicopters over the hustle and bustle of a camp being turned on its head. We still needed to be in Leto's good graces, and Ellen had promised to teach us the secrets of her disciplines if we did good work. So we gathered what computer equipment we could and the data therein as Nele faced chastisement like a dog who'd been whipped. Jealous git. When all was said and done, we escaped with a train of others just as the camp was being raided by the Second Inquisition. The migrants weren't so lucky. We hightailed it to Tucson after spending a night holed up in the desert, and Leteau paid us handsomely. So did Olive Krona. Sometimes it pays to be loyal, even if it means being a Camarilla lapdog for a night. Fuck Julian anyhow. We spent the remainder of the evening being ferried to various real estate locations by one of Leteau's lackeys, examining each and getting our eye on a few places that fit the bill. Which brings us to the next night in our journey. Now, I'd like to take a moment to recognize those of you just joining us. We appreciate your presence here in my Elysium. My name is Bartholomew Nieder, and I'm one of the kindred, formerly destined to uphold the veil between realities that my kind calls the Masquerade. I have my own reasons for telling you these stories today, and undoubtedly many of my fellow kindred will be seeking the vitae coursing through my veins even as I present this story to you. Not to worry. Plans have laid in place for many a year to deal with those who might try to discredit or eliminate the power in this narrative. You need only to listen, to think for yourself upon the story presented to you, and to arrive at your own opinions about the kindred who have long since sat in hiding from your kind. You might think us monsters, but no, we only seek to eke out an existence the same as you. We're currently a little more than midway through the synopsis of our lives thus far from the Night Road, experiencing the story of another kindred, an 11th generation gangrel neonate named No One, as they progress through the politicking, the horror, and the fear of employ through the Camarilla's servants. A prince, another gangrel by the name of Prince Leteau, has bade us to embark upon a journey to St. Basil's Hospital in Phoenix, to a migrant camp, Camp Scheffler, on the Texas-Mexico border. And next, we move to New Mexico, wherein our story continues. However, I bid you allow me just a moment to step away. I need to find something warm with which to wet my throat, lest it give out in the pursuit of this all so important story that both kindred and kind alike might enjoy. We'll take a brief 5-minute intermission, after which we will return, renewed. And we return, my friends. I hope in our absence you've been able to find yourselves something warm by which to ease those chilly bones. And thank you for such a lovely compliment, gallants. We do hope the information we provide is not only helpful in your pursuit of a future path with or without the masquerade, but it is compelling, comforting, and welcome in your lives. The next night started with an ominous message on the radio about our most recent affairs in Texas, as well as immigration and customs enforcement's response to it. However, we needed some things for our car, so we stopped at a nearby AutoZone, though we couldn't quite shake the feeling that we were being, well, watched. Thank you for the welcome, Driscoll. How is your night going so far? I trust you want not for anything that might quell your hunger. It is a lovely chance, an encounter that many kindred will not get to experience in their own lives, for one of the things they don't tell you is that while the consumption of most food and drink that mortals might otherwise enjoy makes many of us sick, especially upon first embrace, there will come a time and an excess of discipline upon which we're able to thoroughly enjoy the natural pleasures of human life. As such, this evening, and my evening is going quite well, thank you for inquiring, I've opened up one of my favorite bottles of wine, a varietal known as Carmenere from the southern hemisphere. This is sort of like a Malbec, if you're familiar with it, though it comes from the mountainous regions of Chile. This wine is dark and smoky, full of viscous fruit and bitter chocolate. It lights on the palate much the way one might find the hot blood coursing from the neck of a recently acquired blood doll. Truly is everything that a natural wine ought to be. I should note that my night certainly wouldn't be nearly as pleasant as it is without the presence of all you who have joined us this evening. We're very happy to be able to bring this story to you. Thank you for that, Keeper of our Elysium, Astrophysicist. We certainly aim to please. To move forward with no one's story, we felt watched in this AutoZone within which we had found ourselves in pursuit of some things to remedy our vehicle's necessitations. Thanks to our wariness, we saw the large woman and her two large friends well before they were in front of us, but they were in front of us quicker than we'd have liked. She introduced herself as Agent Donati with the FBI. What could the Federal Bureau of Investigations want with us? She wanted to ask us a few questions. Who doesn't? And like any good 1312 type, we told that pig to eat shit. The agent tried her scare tactics, suggesting she had in evidence some 400 moving violations and double dozens of thousands in unpaid parking tickets. Like we said before, eat shit. Nevertheless, she persisted, wanting us to help take down Leto Kaminsky. Nice to know his last name, even if it did come in this unsavory form. The agent told us how long she's been doing this, suggesting that she didn't have enough time left in the barrel. We resisted her attempt at badgering us. Leto, it turns out, has had eyes on him for a long time, stretching all the way back to the Spanish Guardia Civil and even further to the Ottoman Empire. The agent wanted answers, but we had no desire to breach the Masquerade with so many prying eyes all around us. And so we played dumb. After all, it shouldn't be hard for the Federal Bureau of Investigations to arrest such an old guy. How laughable to think of Prince Leto as an old man. We wasted enough of her time that she tucked an FBI business card into our peacoat before departing in a dark blue Ford Fairlane. We purchased some things and saw Riga on the wing outside the AutoZone. Great. It's a 9-hour journey to New Mexico, to Kiowa Xenogenetics and the cunning Tremere Warlock and Vidjakal, with Julian texting us instructions for how he'd best like us to provide him information and hard evidence. Just what we needed. Julian fucking around and ruining another phone. Thankfully, he had one set up for us just a ways up the road. The drive out was simple. We passed a series of Camarilla joints in our Honda S2000, as well as more than one of Julian's garages marked by his Specifique Karambit. Information to file away for later. Knowledge is power, friends. While we drove through the barren wasteland, Magda by our side, we reminisced on the past few nights. Considering the trials we'd undergone in our service to Leto, we patted Magda as she hung her head out the open window of the Honda. Good Magda. Trying to research the Warlock had always proven difficult. She started in the New York Chantry, an errand girl for a more powerful Warlock. She then took resources from the Vienna Chantry and clearly harbored dreams of pairing animals with human blood. Typical Warlock. As we got closer, we saw some ATVs driven by men with big rifles. Big enough to turn us into a holy paste, just in time for Sunday Mass. We bided our time and then saw one of KXG's research subjects, a herd of sheep with tracking collars. We decided to wait a bit longer, then take a sample of blood for Julian's nefarious purposes. It's not unlikely he might prove to be useful in the near future. Getting the blood was easy enough. However, it put us perilously close to sunrise, and we could feel the beast yearning to escape beneath our fleshy body. Luckily, we were close to the research facility. Several structures awaited us, and we were buzzed in quickly. These people seemed to know us as well as everyone else thus far, and immediately offered us a trailer upon our showing of the keycard we were given. We passed through the security and bedded down for the day in our trailer. Untrusting of blackout curtains, we made our bed in the storage station beneath the desk. Magda could have the bed. The next night, we found ourselves attending a KXG party for one Dr. Takahashi. We were quickly approached by someone who seemed to be in cahoots with Dr. Call, one Vani Anand, who made us aware that Dr. Call would be here soon. she quickly got a text and made her way away from the party. We were left alone, and we scanned the crowd, looking for anything that might be considered a violation of the masquerade. One young woman caught our eye, a redhead with a cardigan over her shirt, of which we could read, "E.C.T. Tech Estradit." She seemed witchy enough, though she remained rather clearly out in the open and in the public eye. Then we met Dr. Call, quite the fetching woman. She excused us from the party and led us back into the spill room, where she told us things could certainly be out in the open. Everyone here, after all, knew what we were, and there was nothing to fear here, least of all her servants. We saw many artifacts of sorcery, as well as assistants, blood dolls, and research equipment. And Vidya Call had created in this space quite the setup. But we were here for a job. And Vidya Call quickly offered us the opportunity to feed upon some of her servants. And we took that chance, feeding quickly and using some of the blood we took in to mend the wounds that had been troubling us for so long. It's a good thing we did. We gave Call the information Leto had told us to provide, instructions for her to shut down her facility and life's work. We decided, as she began to read the letter from Leto, that it might be best to distract her, to open up an avenue of small talk, lest she fly into a frenzied rage upon learning the contents of the information contained therein. As we got further along, our distraction tactics held little sway, but her assistants had approached her, offering Vidya Call some consolation as one read over her shoulder. Omega Lantern, thank you for your interest in the constancy of the masquerade. It is a pleasure to find so many individuals interested in that which separates kindred from kind, and the disparate difference between the predators that are vampires and those they would make their prey. Welcome. We're currently in a synopsis of the story of No One, an 11th generation gangrel neonate progressing along the roads of the American Southwest in the service of the Tucson gangrel Prince Leto, a man with his own machinations, to be sure. As Vidya Call continued her reading, we could feel the beast rising within her body, the blood boiling. As anger rose inside her, and that's when one of her blood dolls spoke, telling her to calm down. What a fucking mistake. No one in the history of kindred or mankind has ever calmed down from being told to calm down. Learn from their mistake. Vidya Call grabbed hold of Sanam's skull in black-nailed hands and let her blood sorcerously snake its way down upon his face. Thick, acrid smoke bubbled up from the melting flesh as Sanam screamed in agony as acid dripped its way down Vidya Call's fingertips. Everyone else scattered, screaming. We tried to grab Call's attention, diving out of the way of what ire she might throw our way as she screamed about Leto's decision. How could he? She deigned to query, acidic blood still flowing from her hands as she carelessly tossed it about the room. We rushed her, and we had her attention, all right. We dodged 2 further blasts from her acid, and unfortunately a third caught us squarely, our wrists and cheekbones suddenly bared to the night sky as the acid whisked away our epidermis. But we were alive, after a fashion. Invidjikal showed open amazement at our ability to exist after her assault, and our open wounds seemed to calm her much more than Sanam's unwise advice. Drearily she offered, "You haven't caught me at my best, no one." The Tremere informed us she needed time to compose a response to Prince Leto, and that we'd be staying here a few nights in order for her to create this response. She assured us that it would be no bomb, but she needed to think on just how she would follow Leto's orders. Vani took us to our room and seemed impressed by our ability to stay cool under pressure. We knew what to do, and we spent the night utilizing our freshly acquired blood to heal the aggravated wounds we'd suffered under Invidjikal's acidic assault. Then we went to sleep, exhausted from the effort of pushing our blood up through seared veins. The next night, we awoke and decided that we were going to use our best efforts to hack into Invidjikal's computer systems, seeking some more information about Kiowa's xenogenetics research facility, which we called now our temporary home. We crept along their intranet, posing as an IT security consultant and getting the people there familiar with us. Eventually, someone mentioned something called the Snow Room, and promptly, several KXG members, including the one who'd dropped the term, logged off. Likely, someone would be in a pile of shit soon. Hopefully it wasn't us. The next night, Giselle, the redhead from before, bid us a visit, and told us to come with her, for we had but 10 minutes within which to meet with Invidjikal. It seemed likely that this would be our last night here. Call, in typical K-Knight fashion, had quite the offer for us. She stood in a room beyond several others of increasing horror through which we had to walk, filled with all kinds of information and grotesqueries alike. When we finally met her, she told us she had indeed assembled a response for Leto, and she wanted us to destroy her. We inquired why, wondering if it might be that she'd be reborn in a dark resurrection, some feat of Tremere thaumaturgy, an interesting proposition to be certain. She assured us it was nothing quite so banal before holding up a corpse that had been buried deep in the snow sitting all around us. The corpse was covered in dark blood and magic runes, and we felt like we began to understand Giselle's exhaustion from before. Giselle, apparently, according to Invidja, was a witch who had been blood-bonded to Invidjikal. Call asked us if we were familiar with the Second Inquisition, as if we wouldn't be. She then told us that she could arrange through her contacts for hunters to attack this would-be imposter clone of hers and make good her escape to somewhere far beyond Leto's jurisdictional powers. After all, in her eyes, she had no more need of him now. However, we desired payment, and she gave us just a few choices in how we might be compensated. We decided, amongst those choices, that it might be actually wise to assist this Tremere in exchange for a series of lessons in her abilities in blood sorcery, the thaumaturgy of Tremere, their blood magic that otherwise we'd be unlikely to learn. Quite the trade in all reality. While we mulled over the decision, we took a moment to fully heal our wounds with the blood we'd taken from her blood dolls directly in front of Invigical, just in case the woman's extraordinary temper showed itself once again. After offering us her blood, which tasted exquisitely of starlight, cold, clear, and full of intensely unrecognizable patterns to one who hadn't before studied it, she gave us a series of manuals to study. What the fuck was this? We went over information then, after she had assured us that the powers of blood sorcery lay just beyond the poring over of these manuals she so cavalierly described as a syllabus of study, as if we were some youthful college student seeking knowledge in finance or English or astrophysics. And we spoke then of the different paths we could take to ditch the clone she'd had created of her own body and have it openly murdered by hunters that she'd send against us in order to throw Prince Leto off her path. When we pulled into one of the Camarilla facilities, we noticed a black Econoline van with tinted windows trailing us. It was clearly full of hunters, who quickly exited the van, covered in body armor and wielding weapons that they might use against us. And just as suddenly as they'd appeared, all 5 of them dropped dead, and something bright impacted the chest of the clone of Invigical. She flashed brighter, a momentary look of confusion, fear, and anguish alighting the momentary clone's features before she burned to ashes. A second later, a similar bolt slammed into our chest and started its own path of sparking. Were we to die in the grips of this fire? Luckily for us, the bolt slammed into the phone we'd been given to keep in touch with Invigical. We ripped it out and tossed it away just in time for this mobile telecommunications device to explode. We found we were surrounded by the military and the Federal Bureau of Investigation's agents, wielding even bigger weapons than the hunters they'd just murdered in cold blood. We recognized some of those shotguns, as a prey animal might recognize the smell of a predator who's got it in their sights. Dragon's breath. One of the only weapons we vampires truly fear in the hands of mortals. We jumped into our car, and with Magda's distractionary assistance, gunned the accelerator. We slammed our poor Honda into 2 of the guards who had already begun shooting at us. Luckily for us, they missed Magda, who quickly jumped back into our car through the open window, and their second shots exploded beneath the van, the dragon's breath ammunition setting it alight. We careened away, watching the fireball of death in our rear view. A perilous, if lucky, escape. Two black Buicks pulled out of a nearby community behind us, but wound up running into one another instead of our vehicle. Dumbasses. Now there were federal SUVs in close pursuit, and we decided to gun it for one of Julian's nearby Karambit marked garages. Thank Cain we'd make note of them on our way out of Tucson. Also, I've just been gifted an anonymous subscription to another kindred in whom I hold high esteem. Another streamer breaching the veil of this masquerade by the name of Macabre Derek. If you've an interest in this world of darkness by which we follow, I highly recommend checking out Macabre Derek's stream sometime when he's online. The man is a wealth of vast information, not only about the masquerade and the kindred present therein, but also of creating chronicles by which to create and tell these stories. Truly a wise one. At this point, fearing the dragon's breath, with federal SUVs close behind us, we gunned it for Julian's garage. And as we got closer, fearing that this garage might not open itself to our presence, we found it thankfully did. Though as we slowed down to allow the garage to fully open, one of the SUVs behind us slammed into the rear of our Honda. It was at that point that a bullet ripped through its windshield, leaving the driver of the SUV leaking blood and quite dead. We drove into the garage and they closed the doors behind us. Banu Hakim and their servants swarmed us, but soon recognized us, as so many kindred do, as no one. They offered us a place to stay and welcomed what information we brought their way. Our car was toast, but they proffered us an Uber back into Tucson the next night, for which we were extremely grateful. We printed out a copy of the information we had compiled for Julian and left it in the Banu Hakim drop box before moving on our way to Tucson. It was then that the prince invited us back to the Viper and bade us fill him in on the goings-on at Kiowa Xenogenetics. We did, as honestly as we were able, and he thus paid us handsomely. Another job well done. Or something like that. That night we dreamed of Isla again, and learned she seemed to have some connections to Leto, as well as Jasper Knowles, the Tremere warlock that had created the Nosferatu wight that was previously Dove's sire. Quite interesting. Safely in our haven, the office of the parking garage, we spent some time studying the texts and Vigicall so kindly provided us, and learned there some aspects of her blood sorcery. We also sought to further our studies in thaumaturgy as well as animalism, but learned that our haven, as it stood, was too bare bones to allow us to do much more, and so we moved on to the used car dealership. It was time to get a new set of wheels, as the Honda S2000 we previously drove had been insidiously wrecked by the federal forces arrayed against us. So we spent some time browsing their wares before settling on a vehicle somewhere between cheap and usable. A silver Toyota Tacoma, durable, speedy as our Honda, and maneuverable for what it was. The perfect vehicle, and it left us with a pile of cash to boot. We went to give the Tacoma a spin, and that's when Julian showed up. Fucking Julian. Though, we must admit, we were starting to take something of a liking to him and the information and opportunities he provided. He rode up in a Fisker, which make no noises when they start, so you know. and we promptly inquired as to whether or not we could have it. He fed us some bullshit line about buying us a whole car lot soon should his decisions go according to plan, and then laid out some of the machinations in which his twisted mind had spun up the tools. The silver knife plot, the blade by which Jasper Knowles had created the white from Nosferatu's sire, a distraction, used by him only to ferret out some of the more unsavory elements that might otherwise have been peeking in on his, or should I say our, affairs. This motherfucker almost got us killed. All's well that ends well, though, I suppose. Julian laid out his ideas for the future of Cainites, as well as for the Masquerade. In this age of the surveillance state, he thought to swap the narrative around, taking tabs from the rich, the politicians, and the media. Julian sought to give mortals a view into what the life of Cainites is like, much like myself, and provide them a lens of eye through which to view our efforts. A noteworthy idea, if this kindred does biasedly say so himself. Shortly after Julian departed the gas station, Riga showed up. Prince Leto was always watching. Riga, his eagle, made it clear we should be heading back to the Viper, and it is there to which we followed her. The Viper was bleak, a dismal shimmer of its former shining light. Everyone there seemed pissed, on edge, worried, stressed. Dove informed us that something was wrong. People were going missing, couriers were not arriving at their destinations, and plans were being mislaid. Dove worried of a spy in their ranks and bade us to find that spy in their employ. We worked a ritual using our newfound powers of blood sorcery to better ferret out the best-laid plans of spies and Camarilla alike, and then moved forward, digging through the best sources of information we thought we could find. The low-life scum doing business outside the Viper. We didn't learn much, but we did see one of Julian's spies, Nadja, in the crowd. We thought it pertinent to keep that bit of information to ourselves. We found also a hidden dumbwaiter behind a refrigerator downstairs in the Viper. Things only get curiouser and curiouser. When we got back upstairs, Dove ordered everyone to give up their phones, but we made it a point to hide ours. We needed that phone, after all. That's when Prince Leto arrived and informed us to follow him. He wanted to talk about Julian Sim. Now, for those of you who've had not the pleasure of speaking one-on-one with a prince of Camarilla power, let me assure you that it is a terrifying event. Even when you think you know something or hold something over the prince's head, it's likely that things are not going to go according to plan, and you're only ever one mistake away from destruction at the hands of the prince's servants. Nevertheless, we found ourselves enthralled by the information contained within the prince's chambers. Artifacts, sources of blood sorcery, paintings depicting the vampires we'd since come into contact all littered the halls of Prince Leto's domain, and we found ourselves drawn into them, looking at them for so long that the prince was forced to get our attention to continue the aims of his information. It was then that we discovered that Prince Leto considered Julian Sim an enemy of the Camarilla, that he suspected Julian of having diablerized or drank the blood, the very vitae coursing through the veins of Isla, who we now knew to be a former close friend of Leto Kaminsky, the gangrel prince of Tucson. Luckily, we're not quite as stupid as we might have looked, and we played our hand cool as a cucumber. Cool as a kindred having just awoken from the cold desert sands covering them, no fresh blood coursing through our veins by which to boil our emotions. We remained technically honest with Prince Leto, technically being perhaps the best kind of honest when you're being questioned by a prince, and while he might have been able to tell if we were spitting falsehood in his face like some common vagabond, we only told him that we didn't believe that Julian Sim could be capable of committing such an act of utter horror. After all, Julian Sim didn't commit that act. Julian only brought his former sire, Isla, to us. It was us that diablerized the nearly dead kindred, taking into our very veins the blood and, yes, indeed, the soul of her existence. We could feel her rising in us as we spoke of it. We could feel her memories threatening to overwhelm, but with our own power we shoved them down and retained the blank face by which we responded to Prince Leto. This was the only way we would survive, and we could see utter confusion on the prince's face as he deigned to question our place in this society, that we'd already done so much work within his politicking. When Dove entered shortly thereafter, she told us that the final courier was dead, and a brief conversation ensued between the two of them about how best we might proceed, given the information we now knew. 3 more jobs were laid before us. As Prince Leto clearly deemed us trustworthy enough, or necessary enough, to look over whatever transgressions we might have made, we made a deal by which to erase away through the prince's contacts what breaches of the Masquerade we'd made so far. After all, we couldn't afford by any means to have the FBI and the military and the Second Inquisition breathing down our necks as we traveled far and wide in pursuit of the prince's goals, whether those goals aligned with our own or not. And at the end of the evening, we found ourselves faced with a set of decisions about how best to proceed down this night road. Now, all that said, we're going to take another 5 minutes to refill our cup with something warm so that this voice of ours doesn't threaten to give out as we continue along the night road. In the meantime, we're going to pull up our stats. You'll be able to see both our traits as well as our attributes and skills. And when we return, we'll briefly go over what disciplines we know thus far so that the information of this gangrel you've so cavalierly taken into your hands is available to you by the time we return, that your decisions might be mired in a confidence of education that you've been provided. We stand at quite the crossroads of events, my friends, and it is a pleasure to begin this path with you. That said, let me bring up the information I've spoken of, and I will mute my mic while I step away for no more than 5 minutes, which you will find on the clock. Feel free in this time, as you see the statistics of our erstwhile kindred, to talk amongst yourselves about how you might like to proceed. What you think about Julian Sim or Prince Leto in the Camarilla. How you feel we might better shape our path as we progress down this night road. I hope you will continue that conversation as we make decisions going forward over the next couple of hours. I will return very soon with something warm and delicious filling my cup, and I hope you do the same. I have returned. I'm just reading over the responses thus far in our chat. It looks like my lovely Keeper of Elysium has provided an inquest by which to determine what skills we think we'd like to improve upon for this neonate gangrel. Looks like some would see our constitution of body and the agility to go along with it. Driscoll is quite unsure of how best to put our gangrel's ineptitude of the flesh. Our keeper has provided the kindly word weak upon which to move it. A sharp wit and a silver tongue are often stronger weapons indeed than a steel fist, a sword by which to bring our enemies closer to us, that they might be turned into our allies. Astrophysicist may indeed be one of the culprits in part, bearing the responsibility for spending points on intelligence without realizing what else we might need. However, intelligence is something that will keep us safe in this politicking nature of the Camarilla. It is possible that other outcasts might view us with that weakness as a liability to their cause. That said, I trust all of you can hear my voice, because we are now about to proceed upon the night road to which you have all been called. It is quite a pleasure to have you all here this evening, and I hope as we approach each decision that we take some time to converse with one another about how best we might proceed along our path. It is important to arrive at a plurality of votes, because without agreement, what are we but the rabble upon which we prey? Now, in addition to the things that you see now on your screen, we've also the disciplines thus far of animalism, blood sorcery, and protean. Now, these are the abilities to command our wolf, the Lobo Magda, to command the very blood coursing through our veins, as well as to use that blood to grow claws from the tips of our fingers by which to shred our enemies like so many knives. We take a neutral stance where our convictions are concerned, choosing neither to protect nor rule the weak, to neither perpetuate our existence, nor further regret our sins one over the other. We neither respect nor defy the traditions as a general rule, and we don't seek luxury or comfort, nor do we seek a higher purpose for our life. But we do believe that a better world for kindred is possible. Now, we've taken some time to assess the necessitations of our kindred. I trust that in that time, you've all found a moment by which to make yourselves comfortable, to slake your own thirsts, be they blood or tea or water or wine. And now we move forward with that which has brought us all together tonight. Start wherever you like, no one, Leto says. I'll have more information for you tomorrow night. Oh, and one last thing. Stay off the highways. Driscoll, that is lovely, and I certainly understand that times are getting late and you must head off. I will take a moment to tell you that while it may take some time to reach tonight's episode, we are uploading each of these sessions of the Night Road as they stand and our time here in Elysium together as a podcast that you can find through Spotify, Apple Podcast, and other platforms. Any of these events that you feel unable to participate in, you will eventually find available to listen to one way or the other. That said, it would be far from unfair for you to participate in decision-making this evening, as we welcome the duplicity of choice that each kindred's input offers. Even if it means you must take your leave soon, we have thoroughly enjoyed having your presence this evening, and thank you for joining our Discord as well. The Second Inquisition's contracts and regular government and police agencies are all over those highways. That'll slow you down, but it's only a 2-night trip instead of one. That seems to be the signal for your departure. Dove rises and opens the door, and you can feel Prince Leteau's gaze on your back as you leave. But you and he are separated by so many centuries that you don't know what that means. In this moment, you suddenly feel human again, and you don't like it. You return to your parking garage and park the Tacoma, which brings us to our first decision this evening. Where to tonight? Now, we've just had a conversation with the Prince and Dove about erasing our transgressions of the Masquerade thus far, but we could still worry about the Masquerade and that our haven might be discovered and our bodily intentions destroyed. We could visit the pawn shop and perhaps seek out another weapon. We might visit the imported auto store. While we do have a car now, maybe we would like a better one. We could seek out a mechanic to repair our Tacoma. While it should not have any damage thus far, we might have picked up a lemon from this imported auto store. Perhaps we'd like to take a trip to Madrigal Real Estate and seek out a better haven through which we can improve our disciplines more efficiently. Or maybe we'd like to go to Corbeau Used Books that we can improve the state of our intellectual stability. Paragon Fitness is a gym by which we might improve our physical standing, powering through our ability to more forcefully perform activities. Or we could head back to the Elysium at the Viper nightclub to hone our social abilities. Perhaps instead we'd like to explore the other disciplines available to our blood and thus stay in the parking garage as it stands. We could spend some money and find a blood doll by which to bed down for the evening and sate our growing thirst. Or we have 3 jobs available to us. The first, we could head to Dallas to pick up whatever information Despine has. We'll just need to stop at the Viper first to get her address. Or, as we previously decided with the help of Rhymes with Moose, we could decide to go dig up the emergency cache at Biosphere Zero. It contains a variety of weapons and items by which we might further our other goals, and so we'll talk to Leteau to learn its exact location and specifications. Or finally, we could go to pick up the ground-penetrating radar kit at the Viper, and then drive to the Camarilla station that monitors the Elder Nosferatu Raremus. We've been bid that it's time to get rid of him. Otherwise, our friend Driscoll, have a beautiful night and a lovely sleep, and we'll see you when next we reconvene. Keep your skeleton wet, our friend. For this decision, as it is quite a decision, we'll put 4 minutes on the clock. You ought to see the time recorded on your windows now. And we have one vote cast by Driscoll to prioritize going to the cache. What do the rest of you think about our time? We shall be well, our friend, and we look forward to when next we reconvene, that we might add your voice to the mass of voices that we have gathered here this evening. We do, it seems, have a set of votes this evening, with 2 votes for heading to the fitness station before we proceed, and the other for moving onwards to the biosphere wherein an emergency cache sits. At the end of our time, should the plurality of votes for the fitness session at Paragon Gym remain, we'll go there and visit our old friend, that we might not be lain low by the exhaustion. Now, for those of you who weren't with us the previous evening, I'll remind you that the emergency cache at Biosphere Zero is an equipment kit of weapons and items by which the Prince desires to use to assist in his war upon the Second Inquisition. They've already torn through Dallas, eliminating the coteries in existence there, and pose a threat to the Prince and the Camarilla Masquerade, as they've eliminated all of the couriers Prince Leto has sent out. Seattle is threatened by the nature of events in the American Southwest. The couriers would normally be running back and forth between the 2 cities, providing the exchange of blood dolls provided by the migrant camp, formerly at Camp Scheffler, has suddenly run dry. Imagine that. Things are in a tizzy, and these events do move faster than we might otherwise like. I think that it might be better to do the workout and then the cache, because often when we embark upon a job, we do not arrive back in Tucson for several nights' time, which might put us in a poor position. There are 45 minutes left by which to offer your thoughts on the decision we make next. With 15 seconds remaining, we have 2 votes for moving towards Paragon Fitness, and then moving our lovely kindred towards Biosphere Zero. You tune the Tacoma's radio to hear the news. This is Melpomene Shen, and you're listening to Mel at Midnight. And now the nerd news. Lester Bond of the Santa Fe Institute in Santa Fe recently published his findings of the so-called Desert Stonehenge found in the California desert in the 1970s. Pointing to evidence of the tools used in recent dendrochronology results, Professor Bond claims that the work is a Victorian-era forgery. The Desert Stonehenge drew Forteans, pseudo-archaeologists, and even Native American rights advocates in the 70s, but has subsequently fallen into obscurity as evidence emerged that it was of recent manufacture. but where it come from has not been clear until now. Elizabetta Sneed of the online rebunking service Cahoots claims the Lester Bond is an archon of the 18th grade controlled by the New World Order. She's here with me now. Paragon Fitness is absolutely packed tonight. You barely see Simon. We have in our hands 8 experience points to spend. Should we wish to spend it on strength, we'll use up 6 of those experience points. If we wish instead to increase our athletics, it'll take 3. Combat 2. To drive, another 3 experience. Firearms 2, or survival 3 experience. We could also leave Paragon Fitness. I'll put 2 minutes on the clock in case any others should wish to cast their vote on how we might best build our kindred. And at the expiry of those 2 minutes, should we not see any plurality nor dissent, we'll move forward with increasing our strength as astrophysicist and our other friend have suggested. After all, Driscoll and Astro both make a good point. 'Tis strange to see a gangrel so well versed in the ever-elusive arts of the mind without having any strength by which to back it. For any just joining us this evening, this is an interactive reading of the fiction piece Night Road, based on the Vampire the Masquerade tabletop RPG, written by Choice of Games LLC and Kyle Marquis. At each juncture, we're presented a set of choices, much like a choose-your-own-adventure novel, and I allow a couple of minutes upon which to debate the choices contained therein and arrive at a plurality of votes upon which we best might proceed. Feel free to cast your votes within the chat, as we haven't yet unlocked, though we are very near now, the ability to poll the audience in a useful and effective manner. When we've attained a plurality or time expires with more than one vote cast, we'll move forward with the choices made. And there are 10 seconds left now before we proceed in increasing our strength, pumping some iron at the gym, as someone we all know might say. Our strength has then been increased, which leaves us with but 2 experience points. Ought we to increase our combat or firearms, or do we think it might be best to just leave Paragon Fitness? I'll put 30 seconds on the board for this decision, as we're all quite familiar now with what those decisions entail. If we do save them, it's very likely that we'll be able to upgrade our strength again at the end of this chapter after we've done the job that the prince has laid before us. An excellent question. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge and appreciate each of you who have been a part of this auspicious evening. The evening where we breached our 50-follower mark and will allow us to move forward with our plans for this stream as it stands. It has been lovely to bring this story and the idea of the kindred's existence upon the mortal plane to each of you, as we have so far. We only look forward to continuing to bring this story to your ears night after night, so that you might have a better understanding of what stalks amongst you. Having received no real votes, we'll move forward with leaving Paragon Fitness and progressing along the path to the emergency cache at Biosphere Zero. Chapter 8, Biosphere Zero. How far we have come. Tucson, Arizona, the night of November the 30th. Sunrise comes all too early for the kindred. It's 7:06 a.m. You hop in your Tacoma and drive from your parking garage to the Viper. You tune the Tacoma's radio to hear the news. This is Mel Pomene Shen, and you're listening to Mel at Midnight. Do the dead walk among us? One man says yes. Greg Halden, professor of philosophy at the University of Arizona, claims that he has uncovered an elaborate conspiracy of computerized deception stretching back decades that has allowed criminals, illegal immigrants, and scions of the moneyed international elite to establish new identities as the recently deceased. Professor Halden plans to unveil his findings once his Freedom of Information Act request gains him access to a federal database that has tracked immigration and deaths for the past 65 years. You have a long trip ahead of you, and the light has barely faded in the west by the time you roll into the nightclub parking lot. You wait for a moment until you remember that the guy whose name you never learned, the one with the Ed Hardy shirts, was apparently the Second Inquisition spy. You never learned what happened to him. You head inside. The Viper isn't open yet, and without its crowds and with the regular lights shining on the bars and dance floor, it looks tacky and cheap. Alexander is behind one of the bars, and he waves you over with an archaic beckoning gesture. Your Lobo snuffles around under tables for discarded food. You have been warned to stay off the highways, yes? Alexander asks. And you got rid of your phone? You shrug. You're here for information on the job, not so Alexander can interrogate you. And the job doesn't sound easy. I have the GPS coordinates, you tell Alexander. Is there anything else I need to know? Watch out for Mr. Sims' people, Alexander says. They might know the general location of Professor Knowles' cache and try to follow you to the exact coordinates. Now, kindred and kinda like, we have 4 choices on the board before us, for which I'll allow 2 minutes and 30 seconds once I've finished reading them to you. These people at the Viper don't know we're working with Julian, so we might ask, do you think Mr. Sim will attack me on the road? Let's see what Alexander knows. Perhaps instead we ask if Biosphere Zero is where Jasper Knowles ran experiments on people. We're not really looking forward to seeing the horrors of this place. Instead, we may inquire if there's still any active presence at Biosphere Zero. We're not really worried about guards, but we are wondering if there's anything valuable there. Or instead, we might ask what they know about Jasper Knowles. After all, we're curious about what this cache might contain. Your time begins now. Record your decisions in the chat, and I'll be right back to look over them. And I do return, my friends. Looks like Astrophysicist is interested in A, C, or D in that order. Do we have any other votes to cast within the next 30 seconds before we proceed with option A? I'll remind you that if we have any other votes, either for C or D, we might see a change in how things proceed. It is up to you, kindred, to determine the path of this vampire on the night road. Without your input, we're simply spinning our wheels. So let's see what Alexander knows. After all, they know not that we work with Julian Sim against their own best efforts. I'm told Mr. Sim has a driver of his own, Alexander says. But details of his operation remain unclear to us. Be ready for interference and anticipate Mr. Sim's people stupidly using telecommunications technology, even if it is compromised. One of Dove's retainers beckons for Alexander, and the old ghoul uses her as an excuse to avoid answering any further questions. You circle back to the most important question. Where do you shelter during the day? You know you can't make the whole trip in one night on back roads, and the Camarilla is in such chaos that they can't tell anyone you're coming. Wrapping yourself up inside your truck is possible, but it takes skill to secure oneself and cunning to know where to hide where you won't be disturbed. Because if you're disturbed, there goes eternity. And you can't just stay at the first motel you see now. The Inquisition, after all, is everywhere. And though you're loaded down with false license plates and fake IDs, anything unusual will only draw attention to yourself. Trouble here will expose you to the sun, and almost certainly draw enough notice to violate the Masquerade. I know I don't have to tell the rest of you what a danger the sun poses to our kind. We're faced with another series of choices. Do we think that it's better to avoid settlements and the endless police patrols? So we use our survival skills and patience to find a cave or some other shelter outside of town? Do we head instead for the largest town and stick to the hardest streets we can find, sleeping in sewers or underpasses to stay out of trouble? Perhaps we use our false IDs and bluff our way through check-in at a mid-range motel. A few easy lies will keep the Inquisition off our trail after all. Or mayhaps it would be easy to throw some money around and stay someplace nice. We'll have to rely on our charm and persuade people not to pay much attention to us, but it might be doable. Instead, we might find a cheap place that we can stay that won't ask too many questions, and thus cruise the rundown parts of town, feeling out some place that won't ask those questions nor rat us out. Instead, perhaps we work quickly to not be spotted and break into an abandoned building and stay there. Or do we investigate local newspapers and websites to find empty but unsecured buildings where we can stay? Perhaps we'll use our tech skills to rig up a portable shelter inside our truck. Or, finally, perhaps we'll look for some blood sorcery that will help keep us safe, using our newfound discipline of thaumaturgy to seek out the unknown. Now this is quite a series of choices, and I'll allow 2.5 minutes to choose, starting now. Difficult to say. I think that police are the least of our worries, all things considered. With the Second Inquisition, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and the military all at our backs, we have bigger fish to fry than what the pitchiest police departments of the American Southwest might bring to bear. About 1.5 minutes remain to make this decision, kindred. Take your time, but tarry not, for the things that hunt us on the night road hunt quickly. A little under 1 minute remains by which to make the next decision in the path of our gangrel neonate no one upon the night road. Choose wisely, my friends. I'd like to reiterate that it is a pleasure to have all of you here with us this evening, making decisions that shape the trail of the young neonate gangrel. One 11th generation vampire, 10 generations removed from their progenitor Cain, whose blood flows through their veins. That said, without a decision made upon which we might proceed, I think it might be best to use our survival skills and patience, learned through years in the naval academies and our time as an officer, in order to find a cave or some shelter outside of town. I'll allow another 30 seconds, which you'll see on your screens, by which to make this decision, should no other decision be reached, before we move forward. I didn't. You're what? Okay, it says you Bandini. I don't see whoever Blood is, though. I don't see that person in the chat. Huh? They left? Alright, well. Let's use those survival skills at our call. You consider your next idea, and as dawn approaches, you and Magda check the wilderness outside of town. It's not easy finding a cave that will fit you, and it's especially difficult finding a place to hide your truck. By the time you park your Tacoma, it's only a few minutes until sunrise. You return the way you came, looking for a crevice you passed earlier. You finally rediscover the cave, just as the sun crests the eastern horizon. Your skin boils and blisters. Gritting your teeth, you throw yourself into the cave mouth before you crumble to ash. As you get back on the road heading west, you scan your rearview mirrors for signs of pursuit. You keep seeing headlights behind you that fade away whenever you look at them for too long. Not all violations of the Masquerade are obvious. You fear that your need for shelter during daylight hours has allowed someone, a hunter, a journalist, a curiosity seeker perhaps, to piece things together, to make the leap from suspicion to certainty. You hope they won't be waiting for you as you make your delivery. To avoid major cities, you spend a few hours taking back roads, then head north past the Grand Canyon to the southwest corner of Utah, a route that keeps you away from Las Vegas. The side roads are beautiful in the starlight. Then it's a straight shot north up past Route 93, a landscape of low scrubs with low mountains in the distance. Everything here is low and humble, except the sky, which is so vast that you half expect a second moon to rise. But it's just you and the stars and the moon, all the way to the coordinates. A few old barns dot the otherwise empty landscape. You memorize their locations in case you need cover for the day. Soon you pass faded warning, restricted, no trespassing, photography is prohibited, signs and a fallen chain-link fence. You go off-road to reach the exact coordinates. A black ruin rises against the desert sky ahead, an irregular hulk of poured concrete and broken glass. There are fresh tire tracks on the path ahead. That's not good. You approach obliquely, lights off, and spot a GMC Savannah conversion van with its parking and interior lights on. A half-dozen people are in or near it. This place was supposed to be deserted. You spend a few minutes watching the group while Magda circles the campus of Biosphere Zero. 6 people, 3 men and 3 women, ranging in age from their 20s to their 60s. Phones, laptops, dedicated recording equipment, enough food and supplies for a week. Ropes, crowbars, helmets with attached lights. They're equipped for serious exploration. 3 options stand before us. Do we think we're here for one reason? To get the cash back to Lateau and wonder if we can get close to the coordinates without the mortals noticing? Do we wonder about the actual structure of Biosphere Zero? What can we see? We're fascinated, after all, by what people tried to learn here. Or do we wonder instead if these mortals aren't hunters? We'll look for signs that they're here for vampire hunting. 2.5 minutes stand on the clock to discuss and decide, Kindred. The choice, as with every other choice along this path, is only yours. I agree that it's odd that any hunters would make their presence known in such an alarming way, which might mean they're not hunters after all. There are a growing contingent of mortals who seek out urban exploration fronts around the world, after all. And these people are equipped with a series of devices by which to pursue their urban exploration. Perhaps they're nothing more than thrill seekers looking to find time in the night to make their own. Well, as we've one vote for option C to make sure that these mortals aren't hunters, we'll proceed with that, as the expiry of our time has been reached. You get as close as you can to the conversion van and study these 6 individuals. They move and speak with the flush of life, meaning they're almost certainly mortals. They could be ghouls, but somehow doubt that. But there is something. When a middle-aged man in a windbreaker turns to grab some lighting equipment from the van, you spot the silhouette of a pistol. That's hardly what you'd expect from urban explorers or whoever these people are supposed to be. More intact than I thought, the woman with the ropes says to the guy with the gun. Yeah, he responds, hefting the lights. I thought it would be stripped down. Or guarded. Why hasn't anyone... The desert wind picks up and the voices fade. Stop double and triple checking everything, a gray-haired man in faded denim tells the youngest member of the crew, a woman with a shaggy pink pixie cut. Let's get inside. Rick still hasn't shown up, the woman with the pink hair says. There's a brief conversation about Rick, who is apparently their computer guy. You listen carefully. The guy with the concealed pistol takes a bolt cutter and snips the chain strung across a metal door. A younger guy with a bushy yellow beard is the first through. He scans the interior with a flashlight, then shrugs and heads inside. The others start moving in. They're moving towards the coordinates of your cache. Not fast, but eventually they'll get there. Now, before I read this next set of choices, we're not only going to check our skills, but I'm also going to remind all of our listeners this evening that any decision that ends in an exclamation mark carries with it the risk of critical failure. Now, it is true that you often cannot have a critical success without critical failure, and high risk does often equate to high reward. That said, let's take a moment to overlook our stats. We are hungry. Our hunger is strong enough to distract us, and you don't have enough blood to use disciplines. Our humanity is well managed, as is our willpower, though we are somewhat wounded, and we've suffered an aggravated damage that makes mending of our wounds difficult. We've also picked up another violation of the Masquerade. Welcome, Katie. What a pleasure to have you here this evening. Your oof is well deserved, as our poor kindred no one is suffering quite a series of injurious evenings. We've got some strength, though not nearly as much as a gangrel clan kindred might, but we are quite dexterous and even more composed of constitution. Our charisma is well in hand, though we've little by the way of manipulation or composure. However, for a gangrel we are quite intelligent and resolute, with some wits to boot. Of our skills, we hold some measure of athleticism, as well as the sneaky sense of clandestination. A milder sense of combat and firearms, though we're quite capable of driving, and while we may not intimidate anybody, nor hold the streetwise skills of one who's spent time in alleyways, our leadership and persuasion, as well as subterfuge, do hold some ability to manipulate those of the mortal fold. We're quite academic, skills in investigation and technology and survival from our time in the Naval Academy, and some awareness of what goes on around us. We do hold the powers of animalism, thaumaturgy, or blood sorcery and protean at our beck and call. Now, we stand faced with a series of decisions which I expect you know to record within the chat itself. Do we think there's no reason we should hide from a bunch of mortals and introduce ourselves as a courier, though not a vampire courier, mind you, and try to persuade them to trust us? Do we lie and pretend that we're an academic journalist? That should let us travel with this crew and see just what they're doing. Or do we roll up hard and demand to know what they're doing here, hinting that we have the authority to get them in trouble? That will get them talking. Perhaps instead we decide not to reveal ourselves just yet, and thus follow and watch them from a distance. Staying out of sight, after all, should be easy, even though we might not hear much. Or instead do we sneak behind them and stay close, that we might hear what they're talking about, though it will be harder than the hanging back might otherwise be? I'll give you 2 minutes to discuss this decision amongst yourselves and record your decisions and choices in the chat before we move forward with the plurality of votes. That time begins now, friends. Katie, it is a pleasure to have you join us this evening. Our journey along the night road has been quite a struggle so far, as we've encountered Bruja, Ventru, Nosferatu, and Tremere alike, all of whom in some way have either assisted us or tried to bring us harm. It may be bad. However, I would say that following a group of mortals while the hunger has risen inside of us, while it might bring out the concept of the beast extant within our blood, does provide us with a strong sense of prey upon whom to feed. I'll remind you of our first night in the convenience store when we held far less strength than we do now, and we personally saw to the end of those 3 mortals. If you're interested in the content you're hearing thus far and you'd like to continue to follow the path of this gangrel neonate no one, please follow us here on Twitch, or if you'd like to hear past episodes of our adventures, look for us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or other listening platforms under Elysium. I am Bartholomew Nieder, though you can call me Bart, and it ought to be quite easy to find the Titian eyes, the orange call of our gaze sweeping over the limelight. Thank you for showing interest in the veil between realities, Katie. I have my own reasons for breaching the Masquerade to bring this story of vampire and mortal to you. I look forward to exploring those reasons over our time together. With no other choices recorded, it looks like we will be sneaking behind these mortals. We'll stay close, hear what they're talking about, and hope they don't see us lurking. They all file inside and set up lights to explore the room. It's a reception area that leads directly to a high-ceilinged atrium. They take recordings, make notes, and check maps. Magda takes the lead, utterly silent. You watch them work, moving from one point of cover to the next. You're almost close enough to hear them talking, too. But as they break apart into smaller groups, you make the mistake of creeping forward, just as they turn on a floor light. "Who's there?" one of them shouts, and you turn to run, but there are 2 more behind you with flashlights. You're quickly surrounded. The old guy with the concealed weapon shines a flashlight in your eyes, though he doesn't draw his weapon. "I'm here to make a pickup," you say quickly. There's a bit of confusion since they don't know anything about your pickup, but you hand the pink-haired woman your coordinates. After another consultation with the others, she says, "Yeah, that's in here. Weird. Paul, put your flashlight down. It's not like you can arrest anyone. We shouldn't be here either." So, it doesn't look like you're exactly in trouble, but you're not going to be sneaking around either. Maybe you can use these people to help find the cash. Everyone heads through the metal door. After scouting out the ruined entryway, you help them set up lights in a high-ceilinged atrium, careful to avoid being recorded as they get to work. The group is standoffish and suspicious, but as our Keeper of Elysium, they relax a little once they learn you have a dog. After a few rounds of introductions, you're able to put names to faces. Stephanie, a tall, gaunt woman in well-worn clothes, and Janet, a 20-something with a pink pixie cut, are journalists. Tex, they really call him Tex, and Ophelia are scientists, ecologists, which makes sense for a biosphere. Tex has a big blonde beard and a big steel crowbar and is excited to knock down some doors. Ophelia, middle-aged, small and wiry, always wears a helmet with a headlamp and carries the ropes. Paul works security and keeps everyone organized. He's the older guy with the concealed weapon. The other older guy is Antonio. He's apparently a lawyer with a focus on immigrant rights. What a strange group of mortals we've stumbled upon. As you work and chat, you slowly figure out what the group is doing here. They're here to find records of the experiments the federal government ran on the prisoners here. The journalists plan on pitching the story, while Antonio has an obvious political motivation for learning the truth. The scientists are there because they can understand the nature of the research, though without Rick, their computer guy, they're not sure if they can access the old computers. They're going to need to find the hard copies. After an hour of preparatory work in the dreary atrium, the group stops to eat and check Twitter, and you remember that you have a job to do. You beg off to make a call, borrow a GPS device, and head for the exact coordinates. You pass through the gray and crumbling atrium to a section of interior wall that's given way. Faded paint stripes run along the ground and walls to direct people, but the signs are all gone. Picking your way through the rubble and darkness, illuminated only by the group's increasingly distant halogen lights, you step through the hole into an interior courtyard, open to the night sky, with all the cheer of a prison yard. There's your target, right in the middle of the courtyard. Even as you approach, you can see signs of a recent excavation. Whatever was down there, it's gone. You stare into the open hole. Just remember, sometimes staring too long into the abyss stares back. Of course this was going to happen. It's not like you got out of Kiowa Xenogenetics without having to run a favor for Dr. Call that almost got you vaporized, or even got to drop off your messages at Camp Scheffler and St. Basil's Hospital without a huge mess. There are drag marks all over the courtyard. Whoever moved the cache did it so recently they might still be here. And when you were outside, you didn't see fresh tire tracks leading out. You need to figure out where in Biosphere Zero someone dragged the cache. But investigation will have to wait. It's an hour to dawn, and you still need a place to stay. You head back to the group and explain that you drove all night and need to sleep, then head deeper into the building. The missing signs make the place hard to navigate, but they left one, and the Westminster-like font says, "Gym ahead." You follow it to a windowless shower attached to an empty gym. A long storage bench is just the right size for vampires. You set Magda to guard your temporary haven, and you fall asleep. Now, we are at what might be an excellent stopping point. The night has just ended. We're about to move forward with our, shall we say, adventures inside the dark laboratory of Biosphere Zero. What I'll do here is I'll put 1 minute and 30 seconds upon the clock. If those who are listening so far are interested in pursuing a little bit further, we can perhaps continue to the next night on our journey. Otherwise, it may be wise to take a pause here and pick up where we've left off tomorrow at 9 p.m., given more time to assess decisions and move forward with them. I am happy either way. I think things are just about to get good, and who knows what the darkness of Biosphere Zero has in store for us. After all, it looks like one of these poor mortals might be dead. Please record your decisions. Uncle Tom, bonjour. Welcome to the Night Road. It is a pleasure to have you here, and while my French might be a little rusty, I'm happy to attempt some conversation in your native tongue. Ça va, mon ami? Oh, c'est trop bien. Moi aussi. J'étudie le français par 2 années à l'école. Quoi c'est difficile, mon ami? Je bois un vin, les carmenières au Chili. Nufur, c'est comment dit-on enough? If you say it is simply enough, I'm going to be quite upset with myself. Assez. Nufur n'est pas assez. Merci, mon ami. We stand then at a crossroads with new viewership and new blood by which to revitalize ourselves. If we would like to continue, we do stand at a bit of a crossroads, and I will remind those of us listening that while not every episode is yet available, we are uploading each episode as we move forward as a podcast format through Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're available now on those platforms under Bartholomew Nieder's Elysium. Look for the TC&I. Our next episode ought to be up early next week, as we have recently uncovered some of the secrets of editing through audio software that might allow our stream here to be more easily digestible. However, if we've a few that would like to continue and make decisions that might further shape the decisions of no one, the 11th generation gangrel neonate in the harsh deserts of the American Southwest, we are more than happy to continue along this path. For an interesting path it does become. Let me assist my Keeper of Elysium for one moment. We'll return here in about 2.5 minutes, I think. And then we'll continue with the decisions that shape our gangrel neonate's life. On the Night Road, an interactive fiction by Choice of Games and Kyle Marquis. Grab yourself something warm to drink, settle in somewhere comfortable, and let me lull you into a sense of security before someone sneaks up on you and steals your lifeblood. You know, that is an interesting question, Tom. I am not 100% certain if they've translated it into French. Let me do a quick moment of research. From what I'm seeing currently, it doesn't look like they have a localization for French or really at the moment any other languages. However, before I started this stream, I did reach out to the creators of this interactive fiction, and I would be more than willing to reach out to them again and see if they have any thoughts upon localizing and translating, traduit, the novel itself, because I think that that is a currently kind of a missed opportunity for them. Let me, while we're waiting on the return of our Keeper of Elysium, let me start a quick email here. That's right, her name was Abby. One moment here, I'm typing a message out to Abby Trevor, one of Choice of Games' contacts that I spoke with about being able to stream this content thus far. Je suis en Seattle, Washington, en USA. Et tu? Où vis-tu? En France. Par où? Ah, Toulouse. I've seen a lot of things I really love about that area, though I haven't visited France myself, though I'm quite desperate to. And I have sent now Choice of Games an inquiry as to whether or not they have localizations and translations of Night Road, or if they intend to have translations or localizations. Give me one moment to set our Keeper of Elysium back up. She's just had a bit of a surgery from which she is still recovering and growing ever stronger by the day, badass that she is. And I will return in just a moment to continue the story of No One. Toulouse, c'est une habitation du bien. J'ai... comment dit-on find? Grand pleasure du bien. Although, j'abois du vent... c'est maintenant. I think I used the wrong words there. My apologies for any butchery of the French language I may be making. It's simply a pleasure to be able to speak it in any way with another. And also, Tom, I will send you a message tomorrow with the response from Choice of Games and Abby, their representative. I'm quite interested myself now to see if there is localization or plans for a localization in the works. Le plaisir, c'est juste my own, mon ami. So now, let us continue down the path of no one. Holy shit! Holy shit! The shouting wakes you early. You check your DW watch. It's still 5 minutes to sunset. Aching with exhaustion and an almost unbearable hunger, you rise. No sunlight enters these rooms, so you'll drag yourself into the empty gym. Magda only tilts her head quizzically. Antonio, the immigration lawyer, and Ophelia, her headlight shining, skid into the gym and spot you. There they are, Ophelia says. Where were you just now? Antonio says. The old lawyer is clearly suspicious. Of what? Sleeping, you say, and you're convincing because you can barely stand. Vampires look like corpses during the day. Odd, that. What's the problem? Tex is dead, Ophelia says. You grab your stuff and follow Ophelia down a winding, unlit corridor full of abandoned furniture to an office complex. Tex is face down on a metal office desk, his throat shredded. There's blood all over the felt partition of this cubicle farm. A brief investigation reveals that Tex has been drained of blood. What appropriate music. The others gather around like silent mourners. Stephanie sets up a floor lamp and aims it at the corpse as you look for footprints. You and Antonio follow an overturned metal chair to an adjoining room full of old TV broadcast equipment. But that's where the trail ends. Even Magda can't pick up anything more. Do you know what killed him? You ask when you come back. I know what was keeping him alive, Janet says. His neck. Without that, he just... Show some fucking respect, Paul snaps at the pink-haired woman. 3 choices remain before us, friends. You are all in terrible danger. Get in your van and leave, do we say, knowing we can't have more corpses on our conscience? Or perhaps instead we say that we can't have them discovering the exsanguination in case someone starts thinking about vampires and suggest that we should bury him as quickly as possible. Instead, perhaps we question why Tex. I mean, was he killed specifically, or did the killer just see an opportunity and take it? We're trying to see the bigger picture here. I'll allow 2.5 minutes to decide. And if there is some dispute between the decision we're making, perhaps we can discuss why we might be making it. The choice, mes amis, is yours. You're right, trails don't just stop. And, on top of that, we didn't see a vehicle's trail that had left the facility, which means that whoever took that cache that we were sent here to find is likely a kindred that drained Tex of his blood, exsanguinating the blonde-bearded man while we slept peacefully in the darkness. What a twist of events. M. Night Shyamalan would be proud. Seeking the mortal's help is certainly a risky endeavor, but as I always say, little risk, little reward. As you all know, I've already sought the assistance of all the mortals gathered here already in the pursuit of breaching the Masquerade and learning more about the veil that separates our two realities. Perhaps we do say fuck it and gain an ally that might further live, even if it leads to the ire of the vampire realm and those who would hunt us. Without any dissent, it looks like we will move forward down the path of asking why Tex was specifically killed. Perhaps he knew something he shouldn't have, or carried something worse than we knew. That's a good question, Antonio says, leaning back against the partition and trying to think. I'm going to take a quick moment here to turn the camera towards my own Lobo, Magda. I don't know if you're able to see her right here beside my hand, studiously watching me as we progress down the night road. But she clearly has some things to think about it. Lovely puppy. I think she deserves a treat, actually, before we continue. Give me one moment. Would you like a chicken stick? C'est mon chien. Mon chien belle. Ah, la bête indeed. Astrophysicis did just buy our two lovely beasts their own clothing by which to conceal their bestial nature. It doesn't add up, Janet says. The journalist sets her laptop up on the corner of the desk. Maybe, hey, I know, maybe texts like, surprised a government agent who was just sent to spy on us. There was a fight, and maybe the agent grabbed, like, some office scissors. Settle down, Laura Bow, Paul tells the pink-haired journalist. You're just guessing and getting yourself worked up. Paul is right, Ophelia says. No one here is a doctor, so we can't conduct an autopsy. You expect them to head for the van and leave, but after a few minutes, Ophelia finds a walk-in freezer next to an abandoned kitchen. When they start hooking up a generator to turn it into a makeshift cold room, you realize they're staying. You hide your incredulity, but Ophelia answers your unspoken question. We're not leaving until we have what we came here to learn, the scientist says. You probably think we're crazy. You're thinking that while a human rights lawyer and some journalists might want to stay, a scientist should get out. But you stay silent as you help with the body. It's true. I first got interested in Biosphere Zero from an ecological perspective, Ophelia says, but now it's more than that. Our world is dying, no one, and there are powerful people trying to kill it. Some of them worked here. Some of them are still alive. They're senators and lobbyists. They taught me biology in college. I'm going to learn their names, Ophelia says. And then Stephanie and Janet are going to tell everyone. She glances back at the two journalists. We're not leaving. So, that's that. The group makes sure the walk-in freezer is running properly. That will serve as an improvised morgue for Tex until they can get him home. Everyone makes sure the freezer is cold enough, which gives you time to investigate the missing cache again. But though you see signs of disturbed earth and drag marks, they end suddenly on the concrete floor. You find a folder labeled Emissions Data 1945 to 1970 where the drag marks end. But it's empty. Magda can't pick up a trail and you can't find any footprints. The explorers return to their camp in the atrium. They stay close together and listen to Paul, who is a civilian contractor in Afghanistan, and who knows at least a little about operational security. À bientôt, mon ami. C'est un plaisir pour vous, comment dit-on, to join us? Ah. It's very lovely to have you, both here and in the Discord, and I'm sure we'll talk very soon, Tom. Thank you for joining us tonight again. I hope you have an excellent day. We will see you very soon, and we'll be back live again tomorrow night. Their plan is to explore the whole facility and eventually find their own cache, a record of everyone who worked at Biosphere Zero and what they did here. It won't be easy. One section off the atrium is completely collapsed, and another wing's ceiling is caved in, leaving it strewn with rubble and dangerous to cross. And the place is huge, but they're determined. Now, Magda is making her pleasures of the evening known to us. Would we like to make sure the explorers focus on security and don't go wandering off? After all, we don't want any more dead bodies on our hands. Should we instead slip away and check the cache location again? We are just here for a job, which is to find Jasper Knowles' data and get it back to Prince Leto. That's it. Perhaps we decide to look for anything worth grabbing around here. Is there anything valuable? Or do we think that this place is amazing and look around for anything we might learn? I'm going to put 2.5 minutes on the clock for this decision, after which we'll move forward, though after this decision it's quite possible we will call an end to the evening, that we might better create a rejoinder for tomorrow, a night of action and activity through which we find ourselves moving perilously close to the dangers inherent. Zero or 100 is definitely the mindset that gets me into streaming for 6 to 8 hours at a stretch. My dear Keeper of Elysium and I are of much the same ilk, I'm happy to say. It's lovely to be supported by such a caring individual who feels much the same way I do. That said, the rising sun does call to my blood and brings forward in me the feelings of exhaustion that our kind feel when faced with the beast rising in our blood. I think perhaps we might best to make this decision and then call an end to the evening, that when we rejoin each other tomorrow night, we have the strength to carry on through the action that's sure to follow whatever decision we make here. Very true. Then, would we prefer to make this decision itself tomorrow night? We'll begin tomorrow with a brief synopsis of the time we've spent here at Biosphere Zero to let our people know what has happened, and then move forward with the action as it happens. This is a tense situation after all, as Astrophysicist points out. One of the mortals has died. We stand naked before the masquerade, our blood alight with the idea of our cash stolen, another kindred on the loose in the biosphere, and a group of mortals desperate for answers about their own questions that lay currently obfuscated. I think this may be the wisest course of action. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening. It has already been an eventful night. A long recap of the previous week's events. A long amount of time spent exploring the night road, which has led us to Biosphere Zero and the intricacies of the danger that lies therein. Tomorrow night we have before us the dangers of a masquerade breach. Another kindred who's been set loose to discover the coordinates where an emergency cache has been hidden by the Tremere warlock Jasper Knowles that Prince Leteau has bid us to find. And the more decisions upon this path that we discover, the more likely it is we are to run into danger. Thank Cain for our trusty Lobo Magda. I must say for my own part that this evening's music has been chosen exquisitely. Set on random and not chosen by myself, Pretzel, an app that allows you to play royalty-free music for your stream, has done an exquisite job in providing a backdrop for this evening's activities. I'd like to thank and recognize each of you who has joined us this evening and participated in shaping the path of our Gangrel neonate. Without your participation, we wouldn't be here tonight, and I do so look forward to bringing further into your lives the idea of this veil between realities, of the reasons that I would breach the masquerade myself and flaunt the rules of the Camarilla who would otherwise hide their predatory nature from those they think of as cattle and only so much prey upon which to feed. Perhaps in time, when we begin to know one another in a greater capacity, we'll have reason to further share the information of why we are lifting the veil upon our mortal bride. All that said and spoken, I would like to wish you, my friends, a lovely evening, full of revelry and rest, excellent drink, good friends, camaraderie, and conversation. You deserve it, and unto the earth, as well as the stars, we will speak beautiful things to your existence. All that said, my friends, I bid you good night, good bite, and good fright. And we will reconvene on the morrow to further traverse the night road. Oh, Jean, the big oof. Welcome nevertheless, and it is a pleasure to see you. We're just wrapping up for the evening. However, we will be going live again tomorrow to continue this session of the Night Road, for we're just getting into the meat and potatoes of the evening. You are just a little behind a nice conversation in French with one of our new friends, Uncle Tom, à the inn. Your own linguistic skills would have been much appreciated. That said, I'll send you a message when we finish the stream this evening. I'm quite curious to know how your own stream went tonight, as well as how your projects are progressing. And for any of you who are listening and haven't yet checked out Deus JZ, the man is truly a wonder. He's embarked upon a 30-day project, if I understand correctly, to better and improve himself by spending 30 to 45 or 60 minutes at a time upon each task, be it learning the guitar, practicing his physical education, learning the art of Blender and the physical manipulation of a digital realm, as well as learning the linguistic differences that separate us all and can only bring us together if we're better able to communicate with one another. If you find the time and the inclination and you're able to, I highly recommend throwing him a follow and checking the man out when he goes live. Quite an entertaining individual. All that said, my friends, bonsoir, à demi.